On to this now, we continue looking at the leading story, Nehawu strike, which continues indefinitely. The workers are demanding a 10% salary increase and a housing subsidy of 2,500 rand. Government is only offering them a 4.7% hike. Let's get some details now as to how far negotiations have gone, and we speak to the Director General at the Department of Public Service and Administration, Yoliswa, Makhasi. DG, good morning to you, and thank you very much for your time. Let's start with the levels of violence and disruption to public services we are seeing. What responsibility do you take as the lead department, particularly on negotiations?
Well, good morning, Polly, and to your listeners. Firstly, we would want as the government to indicate that the violence that you have seen over the past few days, it is unacceptable. You would have listened to Minister Makhasi, who was acting minister at the time for Public Service and Administration. On Monday, during the press conference, he really spoke against the violence and called upon all parties to come to the negotiating table so that the issues that they want to raise can be raised at the negotiation table. As DPSA, we are quite clear in the work that we have done to facilitate and ensure that parties are at the bargaining council and are negotiating. Yeah. And therefore, it is our view that the parties who are involved in the violence are the ones who must take responsibility for that violence. Government has not sent workers out on the streets to go and trash government property, and as well as not to do the work that they are supposed to do. We've been quite clear that essential services workers are not supposed to be on strike. We have issued circulars in that matter. We have engaged with our colleagues, DGs and HODs on what to do in cases where essential services workers are not at the place of work, yeah. And they must implement the guidelines that have been issued to them, and also that there must be a no work, no pay in relation to the strike. However, the implementers of that is then the provinces, because they collect the data which they share with us. Thank you.
Well, DG, it is 4 days of strike action, and if our calculations are correct, today is day number 5 of this indefinite strike. You've already spoken about these workers being essential service workers, meaning they are not permitted by law to go on strike. So let's talk about consequences then. How many are undergoing disciplinary hearings as we speak?
Well, we're in contact with our HODs, especially those from the Department of Health in particular, because I think that the strike has hit hard essential services in terms of health. Those are statistics I cannot share with you at this particular time, but the heads of departments are accounting officers in their departments, and they know what needs to be done.
All right. If this situation is allowed to continue, Ms. Makhasi, it's likely to have a devastating impact. And so the conversation clearly leads to a plan. Is there a clear plan to bring this to an end?
Well, there is a clear plan to bring this to an end. There is a number of engagements that are taking place, and the most important thing is to get the parties that are outside of the bargaining council back into the bargaining council. You would have also seen that the General Secretary of the bargaining council of the PSCPC, Mr. Frikkie de Bruin, has called upon Labour, as well the parties that are outside the negotiations at this stage, as well as government, into a facilitation. This was triggered by the work that we have done so far, including the press conference that we had on Monday with Minister Makhasi in respect to calling workers to come back to the bargaining council. So the department is committed to that process, and we want to see our colleagues back in the bargaining council so that we can deal with issues of negotiations and bargaining through the appropriate processes that are governed by our laws.
I'm glad you quoting Mr. Frikkie de Bruin, because what you are suggesting is that there is some optimism, at least from his side, that this could be brought to an end. But on the flip side, he's actually quoted in media reports this morning, the Mail and Guardian to be exact, uttering these words, and I quote now, "The situation remains untenable with no clear plan to move past this impasse." This is the person who is at the top table of the bargaining council. So really, is there hope that this is going to be brought to an end?
Well, certainly I agree with him. The situation is definitely untenable. And I think that where he's saying there's no clear plan, I would beg to disagree with that view, because I think that for us, the plan is very clear. We must persuade colleagues to come back to the bargaining council, because issues that relates to salaries of employees are handled at the bargaining council. The last conversations I had with Friki in respect to this matter, I did assure him of our support as government to the facilitation process, and yesterday I did send a team from the department to go and be part of the facilitation process. I understand that they are meeting today at 1 o'clock as well as part of that facilitation process. And the facilitation process, the aim of it is to bring the parties that are outside of the bargaining council into the bargaining council in order to negotiate.
So let's talk numbers. The workers are demanding a 10% wage hike. How much are you willing to offer?
Well, the bargaining process has started for the 2023-24 financial year. Government has already made an offer on the table. We requested that the process must start in February, and we have made an offer on the table. And those parties that are at the bargaining council, they understand the processes that get followed. That is the first offer that we have made, and I think it's been made public, so I can speak to it, of 4.7%. However, the bargaining process ultimately will determine what is the final offer that is being agreed to, and I hope that there will be an agreement in terms of that. We work with National Treasury, so the National Treasury team is part of the bargaining process, and so from a point of view of us communicating with National Treasury, the process is fast-tracked in terms of getting feedback from Treasury. So I can't speak about the numbers now, except to speak about the number that is on the table, which is 4.7%, that was presented by government at the first instance of the negotiations process.
It would seem that the hardened positions, particularly from the side of the unions, was triggered by that unilateral increase of 3%, which was rejected outright. Why did the department do that?
I think firstly we respect as the department the decision of workers to strike when they think that there is a need to strike, but what we don't support is the violence associated with it and the disruptions for essential services as we have witnessed as government. And I just want to underscore the fact that last year, before we reach a stage of unilateral implementation, we had negotiations that took place over a period, I think, of 7 to 8 months. And I must remind you, Tony, that when we started with negotiations, government had tabled 0.5% on the table, together with the 1,000 rands cash allowance on a monthly basis. But because of the negotiation process, Labour persuaded government to the extent of reaching 3%. And this 3% was reached through a facilitation process. When there was a deadlock, we went to a facilitation with an external facilitator, and there was the government ultimately tabled the 3%, which was part of the facilitation agreement, an agreement that was received by all parties. So we're shocked to see that the Labour colleagues did not sign, because at facilitation, we left facilitation understanding that there was an agreement. So that's the envelope we're given by Treasury ultimately. And for us, it was important to implement it, and we triggered the relevant legislation, the Public Service Act, to implement unilaterally, because had we not implemented, we would have lost the money. Because Treasury has many competing interests that require funding in the country, including service delivery. So had we not committed at that particular time, we would have lost the 3% that we have been able to secure. So we decided on that basis that it's better to put the 3% together with the 1,000 rands, which average 4.5%, into the pockets of public servants for the financial year, other than saying that because there's no agreement, we are not going to implement. The law enables us, where we've tried all means to ensure that there's an agreement, that when there's no agreement, we are justifiable to do the implementation, activating the law. Thank you.
DG, my understanding is that the health workers who are on strike now, and you and I have agreed that they are essential service workers, meaning they are not allowed to strike. My understanding is that there are other sectors, such as the police, that have now also tabled a certificate wanting to go on strike. How many unions have decided or have resolved to go on strike? Those notices that you are sitting with on the table right now.
We are sitting with 2 notices currently of the unions that have resolved to go on strike, and there is an engagement in terms of that particular process. Again, I've been having some engagements with Freaky also around the work that he's doing in engaging with those particular unions. So we are hoping that we will be able to contain the situation such that those unions do not go on strike. Instead, they go to the bargaining table and we negotiate for the 2023-24 salaries for public servants. Our plans were to ensure that we pay these salaries before by end of April, or we complete the process by end of April. And we do hope that we'll still be able to do so with the cooperation and support from our colleagues in Labour.
And confirm for us if it is indeed the unions that are organizing in the security sector, basically the police, they are essential service workers, are they not?
Yes, the SAPU, they are essential service workers, and part of the engagements with them was to clarify, to get a clarity on exactly which of the employees, members of SAPU who are going to be on strike, because they have essential service workers as well. So that engagement, as I said earlier on, is continuing. We are also awaiting today, actually my colleagues are in court right now, because we are waiting to hear from the Labour Appeal Court in respect to the appeal that was made by Nehawu on the interdict that was issued in respect to the current strike.
The reason I'm dragging you to the other unions, DG, that are also classified as essential service workers, is that there is something here that government has been doing for years now, and that is to finalize the minimum service level agreement, particularly for workers who are dissatisfied with their salaries but are prohibited from striking. Those workers now, as clearly shown by Nehawu, they are on the streets and they are compromising the health. And if the police do go on strike, we won't have security in the country. How far are you in concluding that minimum service level agreement?
We are ready to table it at the bargaining council, that document, because yes, government had to make its own inputs into the document, and government coordinates all the sectors like your health, your police, your education, and etc., correctional services. So we are ready to table what we regard as a very well-researched and well-prepared document into the bargaining council to ensure that ultimately there is an agreement on the minimum services document. So it's ready from our part. It's just that now, because of the disruptions of the strike, and also the fact that we are dealing with the negotiations now, so there's an agenda on the table, which is the negotiations, but we are engaging to ensure that this work is taken into the PSCPC.
How many years have you been negotiating this?
Well, I can't speak on that now, but I can tell you that from our side, we've really been pushing, and we've had a number of workshops as well with our people internally, which is the staff in the various departments, the leaders of those members who are in the government coordinating in the government caucus. We've had those engagements. So I'm quite certain that the document that we are going to take back is a document that is agreeable to all the parties. All
right, as a parting shot, but we are in agreement, both of us, that this negotiating of a minimum service level agreement has been dragging on for years. Am I correct?
Well, I don't think it's been dragging on for years, but it's something that should have been completed long ago. The type of work that needed to be done requires also a lot of research and a lot of input, and therefore there's been work that has been happening. So I wouldn't agree to dragging, but I would agree that it's something that we should have completed long ago at the bargaining council, both from the part of Labour and part of government.
Yoliswa Makhasi, let me thank you very much for your time, Director General at the Department of Public Service and Administration. You'll make up your own conclusions about whether there are failures here.